Hello, and welcome to this video on geometric embeddability of complexes. Is ER complete? My name is Tilman Milzo, or just Till, and this is joint work with my friends and co-authors Mikkel Abrahamsen and Linda Kleist. So those are my co-authors, Linda and Mikkel. And let me start with a short definition of what a simplicial complex is. So there's these kind of two very closely related notions. So here on the left we see a simplicial complex, and it's a collection of points, segments, triangles, tetrahedra, and then higher order simplices. So what you should think of this is that these are geometric objects, but not necessarily embedded in some higher dimensional space, but it's just like a segment by itself as a segment. And then there's the abstract counterpart, which is a little bit easier to understand. So we have some set of vertices, some ground set. Then we just have some edges, which are just some subsets of these vertices. And they have this property that if x is an edge and y is a subset of x, then y is also an edge. So here you can see, for instance, we have this triangle, and that means also all the edges must be edges, and all the vertices and the empty set also are edges. So those stand in one-to-one correspondence. So there is only a formal difference, but really they're the same thing. Why do we care about simplicial complexes? Well, they're kind of the James Bond of topological spaces. They're everywhere in mathematics and computer science, and for almost every topological space that you encounter in real life, it's probably topologically equivalent to a simplicial complex. They're just really simple structures that you encounter all over the place and that capture a lot of different things. Now that we have these simplicial complexes set, we can talk about embedding them into something else. Usually we're just talking about Euclidean space, let's say the plane or 3 space or higher dimensional spaces, let's say R5. And there are 3 types of embeddings. There's geometric embeddings, which we will study in this video. This is every edge is like represented as an edge, and every triangle is represented as a triangle. Whereas in topological embeddings, let's say an edge is represented as a curve, and then a triangle is represented as something that you can continuously deform. Of course, overlap is not allowed. And PL embedding, so for each edge we have it as a set of segments. Or a triangle is like, you can subdivide into smaller triangles. On the left, you see examples for in the plane where we have one-dimensional simplicial complexes. And here on the right, we have in 3 dimensions for 2-dimensional simplicial complexes. So we have triangles, and this is, while this is simplex, this is like a topological simplex, and this is a piecewise linear PL simplex. So why do we care about embeddings? So the fundamental question in topology is, when are 2 topological spaces equivalent? Everyone knows the example. The cup is topologically equivalent to a donut. What does it mean? It means that there is a homeomorphism from one into the other. But homeomorphism just means there is an embedding from one into the other and from the other into the one. Really what you are interested in is there homeomorphism, is there embedding from here to there and from there to there. So it really makes sense to study embeddings as something by itself, because we want to answer this fundamental, or we're interested in the fundamental question, when are 2 things the same? And a somewhat easier question is, when does one thing embed into another thing? So let me give a few examples of embeddings so that we get our head around this. So let's start with embedding a triangle into one, and you will see this is just impossible. No matter what notion of embedding you consider, geometric, PL, or topological, you cannot do it because the triangle is two-dimensional, the plane is one-dimensional. And this generalizes. So the dimension needs to be at least k plus 1. So that you can embed a k-dimensional complex into d-dimensional space. On the other side, on the positive side, so if you think about embedding a graph, so a one-dimensional simplicial complex, into R3, this is always possible, and that is well known. And this generalizes also, so a two-dimensional simplicial complex is always embeddable into R5 and so on by essentially the same argument. You can just, if you think about two triangles in R5, they have, like, if the vertices are randomly distributed, they have a 0% chance of intersecting. So that's a little bit counterintuitive because it's hard to think in high dimensions. And then let's go now a little bit specifically on the related work on piecewise linear embeddings, which are algorithmically much more easily handleable than topological embeddings. And there have been lots of results on NP-hardness, decidability, some cases which are undecidable, some cases that are polynomial-time solvable, and they all appeared in top math and computer science journals. So here's an overview. So those cases here, I already told you, they are impossible. They're always possible. Then we know these low-dimensional cases essentially reduce to planar graphs. And then here, this landscape is widely explored. We know NP-hardness. We know some things that are undecidable, but the full picture is not yet there. But we already know a lot. And what we did in our work is we started to look at the algorithmic complexity of geometric embeddings. And our main theorem is geometric embeddability in general of complexes is ER complete. And if you take our results and look at which cases we cover, then we kind of cover this codimension 0 and codimension 1 case. The cases before, somewhat outside of this range here, was already known before. Yes, this is our result, and that gives some fundamental insight into how hard it is to embed something geometrically. So what is this ER complete? I said this is ER complete, and it's a complexity class. It's called Existential Theory of the Reals. That's the full name, and it lies somewhere between NP and P space. And it is known that lots of other problems are equally difficult to the existential theory of the reals, or are complete for that problem. So geometric packing, Nash equilibria, some graph drawing problems related to realizing polytopes, and the famous art gallery problem are some examples I want to mention here. Let me also say something about how difficult it is for us to solve these ER complete problems. Here we look at an example which I like a lot, which is packing 11 unit squares to the smallest square container, and that's the so far best known square container we have, but we do not know if this is optimal. It could be that it's better. There's a lower bound which is not too far away from this size here, but it just shows that we are far away from really understanding, really being able to handle those problems exactly. Okay, at last I want to give some very easy proof ideas. So we reduce from the problem which is called stretchability. In stretchability, we've given a line arrangement like this here, given as a wiring diagram, and you should think of these as lines, but we just draw them as curves, and we want to represent them as lines with the same combinatorics. And so what we do is we take this line arrangement and we build like a little tunnel around each of these lines, and each of these lines we make to a little edge, and where two lines used to cross, we make those tunnels glue on top of each other. So here the blue tunnels below, the gray tunnels above, and then they have these 4 shared faces, here marked in red, with 6 vertices identified. Then we add apex in 3 dimensions, which is somewhat connected to all of those tunnels, and that's yeah, left out a lot of details, but it kind of describes the main ideas of the construction. And then what we do is we need to argue for correctness, which is very tedious, because in 3 dimensions lots of things can happen, which are often very counterintuitive. So what we do is we use this apex and put a little sphere around it, and we imagine the sphere, then we project these tunnels and these lines onto the sphere, and then we can get some properties out of it, which is very tedious. But then we are suddenly in our graph drawing world, and we can see, because these tunnels will behave correctly, that then these projections of these special edges here behave correctly. And they will form actually this original line arrangement as lines. And that's, yeah, then that shows that this is stretchable if and only if the complex is geometrically realizable. Okay. As open questions we have, well, you should fill the table. There are still lots of open cases with different types of dimensions. And also, maybe particularly interesting could be to have manifolds instead of general simplicial complexes. Okay, thanks for your attention, and thanks for watching.